in the late 70s in Manitoba, there were very comprehensive pilots that showed that a basic income does have the results that we're looking for. It lifts people out of poverty. And in doing so is actually more economically feasible. It's like less administration costs. It saves money overall. And that it has the desirable results that we're looking for in communities and doesn't de-incentivize employment, for example, right? It allows people to provide for their families, sometimes gain better employment and seek education, right? And gives opportunities that overall support the economy, in addition to strengthening the social security net.
I'm Colin Burrows, and this is the Woodstein Media Podcast, episode 17. This podcast is produced on the lands of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, Anishinaabe, and Odawa peoples. In this episode, I talked to Kristin Crane, Director of Social Research and Planning for the United Way Perth Huron. The information we discussed might use local data, but the issues focused on go beyond the borders of our local community. We discuss living wage, universal basic income, food insecurity, and other concerns facing the growing number of impoverished people across our country. Check out links for more information about the topics we discuss and, as usual, links to support the musicians played on this episode. This podcast and Woodstein Media are independently produced journalism that you can support through Patreon or by donating through PayPal at woodstein.ca. That's WOOD-STEIN.ca. Thanks for your interest and support. If you enjoy this podcast, you can support it by listening to more episodes and liking, sharing, subscribing, or reviewing them. This is very helpful and appreciated. Thanks again. We'll start with, who are you and how would you like to be known?
So my name is Kristin Crane, and I'm the Director of Social Research and Planning with the United Way. And so the Social Research and Planning Council is a program within United Way, and we address local data needs. We do research on social needs and social issues in Perth and Huron counties, and we are the education hub of the United Way, and we also work on advocacy within the community. So we really have a research and advocacy and education role within United Way.
When the living wage was announced last November for this area here on Perth, it jumped almost $3 in this area. Yes. So first of all, what is being calculated and what is not being calculated in that?
So it is a really, really, really complex calculation. We pull the local data. We also work with Huron Perth Public Health because they collect amounts of data too. And we share the data with the Ontario Living Wage Network that does the actual calculation. And it's based upon a lot of actual expenses within our area. So it includes food. So that's where we rely on data from public health because they have annually they do their monitoring food affordability report, and they do costing of food items based upon Canada's Food Guide. We've got childcare costs, clothing, footwear, shelter, communications expenses, insurance, transportation costs, and that can be, and our areas will have both the public transportation system in Stratford as well as the rural calculation, which is based upon adults working and needing a vehicle in order to access their job if they're in a rural area, and education related expenses. And then things such as diapers, like those items will go into the calculation for the family. Then it's an average of the family of 4 scenario, a single parent with 1 child scenario, and a single individual. And it all has different kind of weighted calculations that are extremely complex. So it'll take those as the annual family expenses or household expenses. Your employment, which would also include government transfers, and then you would remove payroll and income tax deductions to get to what that amount is. And then it is calculated based upon a 35-hour work week. So, and then that's how you arrive at the amount for the year. And it is a lagging amount. So this will actually be based upon, in large part, stats that are collected from the year prior. So it'll have a lot of 2021 information because many things aren't released in the year of use, right? And then some of it will also be able to be calculated for the first half of the year for 2022. But stats are always lagging, right? So this will have shown a lot of the inflation, particularly with rents in our region. But it won't be truly reflective of the cost of food, right? Because it would have been done in mid-2022 rather than the end of the year. And those prices are just continually on the increase as well. And it doesn't include things like home ownership, savings for education, retirement planning. But it is really, really inclusive, even including like a modest family vacation like camping. Like it is really, really, really reflective of the true costs of a household.
Okay.
But at a basic level, we're nothing fancy, no extras. Kids participating in one activity, for example. So
okay, but it doesn't include things like debt that you
correct,
may have accrued
or savings
prior to.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. It's really to meet the monthly needs of a family, looking in a whole year span, right? Yeah.
Okay. And with the list of businesses that are living wage employers, when it jumps like $3, which is
sure
pretty
15%.
big for for even businesses that are really trying to be living wage employers, is there kind of a lag time they have to update or change? Because if I was moving from Toronto and I wanted to apply at places that were living wage employers, how does that work on your website?
So it is the certification process is handled by the Ontario Living Wage. So I have partial information that I can give to you, but it is handled by them. Because of the jump in our region, and there were a few other regions across Ontario that had over a 10% increase. Special allowances were made for those regions. So there was a 6-month period that was provided by Ontario Living Wage Network for certification, allowing for what an employer would need to make adjustments on their end in order to be able to, at the end of the 6-month period, be paying a living wage. So they did give kind of that extra space. It is over and above what the normal period is, and I know that they do still give a few months' time for people to implement. It's more like there's a commitment from the part of the employer to become a living wage, and then you get a few months to implement that, recognizing that budgets are made and created and does take time.
Well, I was writing for the papers, but I couldn't find a story for to write that would satisfy the craving for sensational relating and allow me still to fall asleep at night. So I switched to selling coffee, thinking I had maybe found a better way. But I guess I hesitated, was it really fairly traded? So I counted on my beans and walked away. Where am I going to find my living wage without setting off a landmine or fuel in my range? For I am far too analytical of the socio-political to be gainfully employed this day and age. So I headed for a bookstore, saying, where's the harm in selling books to read? 'Twas a sticky situation when I filled with trepidation, thinking about the cost of all those old growth trees. Where am I going to find my living wage without setting off a landmine or fuel in my rage? For I am far too analytical of the socio-political to be gainfully employed this day and age. So I'll play out this old guitar, and I'll try to somehow stay out of the way of the conscience-wielding soldiers who have occupied my head and try to bring a smile to some folks every day. I'll try to bring a smile to some folks every day. I will try to bring a smile to some folks every day. But where am I going to find my living wage without setting off a landmine or fuel in my rage? For I am far too analytical of the socio-political to be gainfully employed this day and age. Where am I going to find my living wage without setting off a landmine or fuel in my rage? For I am far too analytical of the socio-political to be gainfully employed this day and age.
That was Frank Duresti with the first of several songs called Living Wage that I'm playing this episode. Check the description for more information. I did see some of your presentations to council. I saw that they were both to encourage municipalities to become or remain living wage employers themselves. And I also saw that it was in hopes of getting people to engage in discussion about some of the, as they're called by the United Way, unignorable issues that come along with this, that tie into things in this way. And I saw different reactions. I saw engaged discussion. I saw some people, or at least one person, who was saying it was like joining on a bandwagon to do some of these things. But this is not new. Like, the idea of a living wage and what you're advocating for is not a new idea. It's not new movements. How do you feel when you're making those presentations and people are still talking about it like it's a new thing and they're being pushed into something that, you know, might be too progressive for them? Or,
well, I don't, obviously it's not a personal reflection or even an organizational reflection of acceptance or appreciation for United Way's work or public health's work, right? We know that this is the work that we do on a regular daily basis, and that we are fortunate to have in-depth knowledge about social issues, and particularly issues and factors surrounding those that live in poverty, because that's the work that we do. And we know that when we are presenting and speaking to other audiences, such as in this case municipal councils, that they're looking at a wide breadth of information, and they don't come at it as social experts, and they rely upon people who are to come make these presentations and share the information and local data so that they can make appropriate decisions. Then within that, you have to recognize that people have their different morals, I guess, too, that come into play with people's how people will react to different pieces of information too. So we understand that, and with the Social Research and Planning Council, if we can provide the local data, that strengthens our argument. So it doesn't just come off as a plea for right or wrong decision, right? It's based upon facts. So we do try to share the facts so people can make informed decisions, recognizing that some communities have elected community members to represent them that have that understanding and maybe come from a different place. And therefore, when we share this information, they're reacting in a similar way that you are, thinking, well, this isn't new information. You have some updated stats for us, but overall, the recommendations remain the same as they probably have been since the 70s and 80s, right? For those people who are within that area of knowledge. So things, for example, of a universal basic income, these pilots have been happening. Well, I don't probably have the full information, but since the 70s, in late 70s in Manitoba, there were very comprehensive pilots that showed that a basic income does have the results that we're looking for. It lifts people out of poverty, and in doing so is actually more economically feasible. It's like less administration costs. It saves money overall. And that it has the desirable results that we're looking for in communities and doesn't de-incentivize employment, for example, right? It allows people to provide for their families, sometimes gain better employment and seek education, right? And gives opportunities that overall support the economy, in addition to strengthening the social security net. It is interesting. I really enjoyed the opportunity to go to the different councils and just see how from community to community, the response varies. Some are hearing it as new information that they may not have had the chance to hear before, and others, we've been hearing this information for a long time, and therefore we might be more prepared to take action right now.
One of the things that you were discussing was food insecurity, and it seems very interesting that we're in one of the areas of the world that's renowned for its food production. And there's still over 38% of people that were surveyed for some of the report you were presenting said that they couldn't shop in that outer ring of grocery stores. They couldn't afford to, where fresh produce is, the meats and dairy. And that's where we're recommended to be shopping for our health. And then I believe it was 14.6% of people in this area are food insecure. And first of all, could you explain what food insecure means?
Sure. So there are different definitions of food insecurity. For the purposes of our report, we defined it as household food insecurity. So it's people are unable to purchase the amount of foods that they want due to lack of income. So that's the general definition. So because of financial constraints, I should say. So you could draw conclusions, lack of income. And there are other types of food insecurity, but that's where we chose to define it. And based upon other research, such as the 14.6% of the overall population in Huron and Perth, that comes from national, like Government of Canada community health surveys. We're able to get that stat because they can undertake research projects that are large enough to be representative of the population. So that is a big hike over the previous, I think, 4 years prior. It was at around 11%. So it is reflective of rising costs. So really what our research did is to delve into further about the effects of household food insecurity, better understand how it's affecting families, and really strengthen that argument that it is because of income. So food insecurity is a symptom of lack of income. And that's why our recommendations focus on income related measures, such as paying a living wage and considering that as opposed to a minimum wage, which is just not based upon true actual costs. And then overall, a basic income. So coming from the government side of things, policies that set a minimum standard that is not forcing people to live in poverty, right? It's giving additional finances to those that are in need of it. So it seems quite ironic that a very food-rich, productive region does have households that are food insecure. But really, it isn't the quantity and availability of food that is our definition of household food insecurity. It's the lack of financial resources to acquire that food. So really what we're saying is that there is a lot of food that's produced here. And there are communities, right, that don't have the grocery stores, and that can influence it. That wasn't part of our study. But people are not able to purchase the food because they do not have the money to purchase the food. And those things that affect it are the skyrocketing rents, the prices of food, inflation in general. It's difficult when you live in a region that doesn't have public transportation that the entire region can access, right? So then when you are employed, you do require transportation to get to those jobs. And really it's quite difficult without a vehicle in most of our rural communities. So there's huge factors that influence what a person's budget is on a monthly basis. And really the research from United Way as well as public health shows that these factors influence people's monthly food budget, right? Because food, you can vary it. You can say, okay, today, unfortunately, we're going to be skipping a meal if it's gotten so severe, or there's going to be no food today. People have to make those tough decisions, but they're not able to say, I can't pay my rent, right? Like that's a harder one because the implications might be, well, then you're homeless. So we were trying to show too that food, unfortunately, even though it's a basic need that we all require, is the one that is sacrificed when people don't have sufficient income to cover all of their basic necessities. So it really provides a lot of rich explanation as to why families, and such a large number of families in our region, are facing this. And it really is an income problem.
And then I was just thinking in there, like when that 38% of people can't buy the healthy food that they want from the outside the grocery store. So they're still eating, but they're not eating as healthy. So they might be getting sick more often. They can't get to their jobs. It's a whole cycle that ties into each other.
Yeah.
So,
and there were not a lot, but there were quite a number of comments that focused in on the number of children that are facing food insecurity, that are skipping meals or having to go days without food. And you notice that number is much lower than the adults. So that's showing that it's really getting to a very, very severe nature when it starts to affect the children, because the adults are saying, I will not eat in order for my children to eat. So, when it's getting to the point where the children don't get to eat as much as they need to, that it's a very, very critical situation. And there were comments asking about food programs in school. And those are vital programs that the government provides, and they need to continue and be funded. They aren't the solution. None of these things are a solution. The only solution is for families to have more money in their hands to make these purchases, because they know how much food they need, what food they need to eat. And that we can't only rely upon community food programs, including school nutrition programs, to fill that. They play a very important role, but they are not the solution. And you can't be guaranteed that the child will be at school that day, the day that they haven't been able to eat, because we see the implications of it, right? It increases stress and lack of energy, all of those things that can contribute towards a child not being able to go to school, and or the parent not being able to make it to work. And even to get to a community food program, it may not be in their community, or you might need transportation, or you might be working so you can't access that community food program. They're there to play an emergency role, but they are not the solution. That's something that a person may not think of or realize, again, if they aren't working within this subject matter, right? So some of this information would be new to individuals that heard the presentations. For other people, maybe due to the nature of their work or volunteer work, they're aware of this.
You should make a living wage. Take a number, take a name. You should make a living wage. Take a number, take a name. You should make a living wage. Take a number, take a name. You should make a living wage. Take a number, take a name. You should make a living wage.
You should make a living wage. You should make a living wage. You should make a living wage. You should make a living wage. You should make a living wage. You should make a living wage. You should make a living wage. You should make a living wage. Take a number, take a name. You should make a living wage. Take a number, take a name. You should make a living wage. Take a number, take a name. You should make a living wage. Take a number, take a name. You should make a living wage. 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 You should make a living w
That song, also titled Living Wage, was by Boone. Check the description for more details. For a lot of what is going on in the community, I'd like to know, employers can become a living wage employer, but what else can they do, and what can people in the community do for each other? What are some of the things you're advocating for in the community?
Well, in terms of employers, again, when the living wage is calculated and when an employer goes to certify, they look at the range of benefit packages too, right? Those factor into what the hourly wage is too. So this is the number that represents it, but then Ontario Living Wage will help them do that calculation to see if they are paying a living wage. So again, the work conditions really do impact an employee's overall well-being. So being able to offer benefits, having paid sick days, allowing, like that flexibility as much as possible for when there's illness or a child's illness, that a person can attend to that. Those things all do contribute to overall well-being and satisfaction. So in that term of decent work, like we like to call it, where it considers the wage, overall safety and security in the job security, those all factor in. So when you're able to be an employer that offers decent work, that will lead to overall well-being as well as income security for your employees. So all of those pieces are important. And I think it's important within our community that we are supporting each other. So whether that means shopping locally or purchasing the things that you're able to locally, that will just improve our overall economy. Hopefully when profits go up within our businesses, then they're able to pay their employees more, and then paying a living wage becomes something that's possible, right? Like we all contribute to each other's well-being. And that's another argument to be made for living wage to pay it, is that people have more money available to spend within their communities, but also their absenteeism goes down, their loyalty to their employer goes up because they know that they're being compensated fairly for the work that they're doing, and that translates into that lack of insecurity, I guess, at home, right? And the stress that results from that. And in terms of the average individual, I mean, supporting those employers that that are paying their employees well, where the employees are happy and going to work, that contributes. And also supporting community initiatives that are meant to bring us all up, right? So sometimes the more volunteers that are available, then that might mean that events become possible, whether it's your time or your money that you're able to donate, even for things such as recreation, right? We know that physical activity and interaction with others does lead to overall improved physical and mental wellness. So if you're able to do something that contributes to somebody else's improved physical or mental wellness, then that's an important thing to do as well. So I think it comes down to a lot of the things that can help are the things that you would like to experience yourself, you're offering that opportunity to others, if at all possible, through donation of time or hours, or choosing where you spend your money. And then there's great organizations to become involved with that do advocacy work. Of course, I'll say the United Way, right? We have our community committees where people get involved in determining what the priorities are for their community, and then also working towards the fundraising to make those initiatives possible in their community. And there's other organizations that do really great work, whether they're service clubs or things too, right, that are putting their people hours and time and energy and sometimes money into community projects as well that improve the lives of others, and especially those that don't have the financial means to access all of these programs and services.
I guess I'll do another plug for you for the United Way. When people donate to their local United Way, those funds don't go like to an umbrella organization. They stay within the community, right? Like in the area they were donated. So,
we do. We have a really, we are a completely local organization that is focused in our region of Perth County and Huron County. And then in addition, there's opportunities to become even more localized to your community. So if it's important to you that you live in St. Mary's and your money stays in St. Mary's, then we have those options and initiatives as well, because we have those community hubs and community committees that are working on projects and fundraising for projects too. So we're able to get extremely hyper local with our fundraising, as well as initiatives that don't stop at one border or another and need like a larger approach that would include our region of Huron and Perth. But the funds that are raised stay in our communities, and the projects that we work on are in our communities as well.
When reading the report on the living wage, I saw that you had a message in there that economic growth has to include providing a better way of life for workers, their families, and by extension, the community. And maybe I've already asked this in some sort of way, but how do you feel this can be done to tie economic growth to providing a better way of life?
Well, I think that comes down to the evidence of increasing incomes overall to a standard that is out of poverty, that it's sufficient to cover basic needs. So when there's no longer the stress of having to pay your basic bills and your basic necessities in life, that allows people, it provides them, I guess, like the mental freedom. It removes those stresses so people are able to participate in their community. So there's evidence that shows when that stress is removed of knowing where your rent money is coming from and your bills and your food, when those worries are alleviated, you're able to be in the personal space to participate in your community. So that may mean volunteering right in your community, because that's often something that you hear is, well, it would be nice if people who are receiving social assistance could volunteer more. But we're coming at it from the lens of somebody who doesn't have those stress and worries. And if you don't know how you're going to afford to feed yourself and your family the next day, your priority is not going to be going and volunteering, right? Because that's a huge amount of stress and a burden to be dealing with. But when you have those needs taken care of, absolutely, people are able to participate in the community. And then there's also economic activity that's generated from it too, because you're able to purchase those necessities. Maybe extends beyond to recreation or things outside of basic necessities, and that's increased spending in the community, which starts to improve the profits of local businesses as well. And then even just the profitability for the employers that employ people. There's reduced sick time, reduced absenteeism, productivity increases at work as well. So they have, better financial activity because of this. So I think it's all of those factors that come into play. And then when an employer is doing well, then sometimes that results in community investment, right? Like United Way and other charities are very fortunate to be able to have programs where ours, like our workplace giving, right? Where not only do employees donate a portion of their wages to United Way, but sometimes the employer also matches that. So you see how it has all that knock-on benefit within a community, and then the community programs that are offered too. So we strengthen each other with that improved economic generation that may start with that individual being paid a living wage, and it just works its way up through the economy.
I'm thinking from that, we have a lot of areas out here that are growing right now. Last year or the year before, North Perth here, I think it was the fourth fastest growing community of its size in Ontario. And when there's reports like that, the economy is healthy here, and that probably, I'm just assuming here, probably looks good to businesses that want to relocate and other people. So, I mean, it benefits, I would think, in a way that makes our communities more attractive to people looking to relocate or companies.
Oh, absolutely. Too. Yeah, and when you're in a region that's thriving, right, like that it's economically thriving, but then that becomes like a socially and culturally thriving community as well, because people are able to start participating in activities or start volunteering or taking advantage of programs and services, and then the increased demand will be reflected in the amount of services that are offered, right? And then that becomes an attractive community to others, because you visit it and you say like, oh, this is a place where I'd like to be. People are connected to their community, they're doing things. It seems vibrant, like that vibrancy, and combined with a largely rural lifestyle, is pretty attractive to many people in the world and many people in Ontario too, right? So you can see maybe that it becomes the growth of rural communities. And of course, Listowel and North Perth have seen some very large increases that maybe aren't reflective across the entire region of Perth County and Huron County, but absolutely, it's been driven a lot by growth of employers, right? And the need for employees, and obviously, although we still need more, there has been an increase in the housing supply too. So obviously, if you build the housing, people will come, because there's a shortage across our entire country. But North Perth has been able to respond and has been managing it.
The affordability.
I'm just looking at the stats here too, because we have them between 2016 and 2021. North Perth grew by 18.3%. So it is miles ahead of any of the other municipalities in Perth County and Huron County. So there's the odd one that's had a little bit of negative growth, but like nobody has seen the amount of growth that is demonstrated in North Perth.
Spend some of my time doing deliveries here, and it's amazing the new neighborhoods that are popping up. It's great to see, like in a lot of ways, lots of new people and lots of kids out playing. And although we're talking about that great side of it, I wrote down a quote from Ryan where he's saying almost 50% of the people in this area are living in poverty. It was in a video where he was doing a rant, and I don't know whether this is a real question or just an observation that I just noticed where I wrote that quote from him. But so there's kind of that dichotomy in this area where we were just talking about how great North Perth looks like it's doing, but also I've worked in some of, like, I've done volunteer work here, and obviously what Ryan was saying about 50% of the people living in poverty in this area, it's still visible, even though we are doing well economically too at the moment. So I don't know how to form that into a question, but it's an observation because of what we were talking about and me noticing that quote. How does that make you feel?
Well, it really reinforces the need for like the research and the work that United Way is doing, because we are able to and we're privileged to be able to do this work, and that the community funds us to do this work, to collect the information and share it with the community, and then be able to respond by asking the community to contribute to initiatives that are designed to assist and hopefully actually look at the root causes of why people are living in poverty, right? And what are the solutions to this? So not only respond and be able to support those other charities and programs that are emergency measures, but also look at the causes of it, which is where we'd really like to do the bulk of our work, right? To ensure that these numbers are improving over time, that we don't forget about those that are vulnerable populations. And it really does come as a wake-up call to our community. Maybe 10 years ago, these issues weren't as prevalent, or people didn't see it. I think these issues have always been here, but it's more visible to us now. And part of that is just the amount of, it's just gotten to a critical tipping point where it is possible in our small communities to be able to say, I know that there are people that are experiencing homelessness in my community. I see them. And before, it was invisible. We've always had individuals who have been unsheltered. We just didn't see them. And the grand majority of people are not visible to us because they are not in our parks or our public spaces. They're hidden from views. So that's not a good thing. However, we are recognizing this, and this is something that we have to recognize that is in our communities, and feel obligated to have a response. And we can do better. We can call upon our governments and our industry and our employers to tackle these problems. We know that example is in housing, that the situation that we are in cannot just be given to one person or one entity to solve. They've become very large problems, and that we all need to work together on a solution. It sometimes takes a lot of voices being loud and being consistent with our messages, asking for these things such as basic income. Even though it's not something new, as we started the conversation with, that it's been around for 50 years, and we're still saying the evidence is here that this works. But that's okay. It's a big change, so we have to hope that it'll happen eventually. We just need a critical amount of people asking for it. Or housing. We're now all impacted by this, whether it's because we have a relative or a friend that does not have a place to live or cannot afford to live in our communities. That may result in them living without housing, or maybe they've had to move away, or maybe it's because of a local business that had to close because they could not find employees, because it comes down to there was not any housing or housing that was affordable for their staff to live in. So now that's closed. Or we cannot recruit the healthcare workers that we need because we're limited by the housing again for these individuals to live in, and the growing need that as our demographics shift in our communities from a working age to a retired age, those shifts our needs in our communities too. So we're all impacted by it. So the need is not going away, but I think we all see it now, whereas maybe 10, 20 years ago, a majority of the population was not faced with this in their daily lives and didn't have to think about it unless they really chose to.
In that section of the interview, I referenced a video of Ryan Erb, Executive Director of the United Way of Perth Huron. I will link to the video in the description. Here is the only song I'm playing in this episode that is not called Living Wage. This is Karma Won't Save Us from Rex Tillerson by Dan Burton O'Bacon and the Axis of Dissent.
Take a rock in your hand and let it fall wherever you may be. Testable, repeatable, demonstrable. demonstrable evidence of our situation and its gravity. By application of the scientific method, by taking careful measurements, we find that the enduring false positive of endless economic growth is a luxury our species can't afford. So I'm sorry, but karma won't save us, measured by every soul that ever died. So the rich could get away with getting richer every day, with no palpable corollary consequence. The CEO of ExxonMobil makes in excess of 40 million a year. Being generous, let's say he works a 60-hour week, he makes minimum wage in the time it takes to say minimum wage. So I'm sorry, but karma won't save us, measured by every soul that has to die. So the rich can get away with getting richer every day, with no tangible cost to the ruling class. Killing us softly with orthodoxy doesn't make me angry, it makes me apoplectic. That we'd enable the 1% to drive the whole picnic over the cliff without applying the science of being scientific. So I'm sorry, but karma won't save us, measured by every living thing that has to die. So the rich can keep on, getting richer every day, till it all falls apart and worms and shit inherit the earth. As the peer-reviewed evidence clearly shows, predator capital is a psychosis beyond hope, an aberration, a rogue meme, a failed experiment, and an insult to our millions of years old evolved intelligence.
I think I've covered everything that I wanted to. Is there any other message for people that you want to get out, that you have in mind?
Yeah, I mean, they're big issues that we're talking about. United Way doesn't deal with the easy ones to solve, or else we wouldn't have to be here. We'd be doing something different. But I would just urge people in the community to get involved. There's so many different ways in order to do that, and there's no wrong way to get involved. If you're positively contributing to your community, then that's a great thing, and everybody has their different interests, but just get involved.
All right. Well, thanks for taking the time to talk to me today.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity, Colin. Thanks. Bye.
Thanks for listening, and thanks to Kristin for the interview. Check the description wherever you are listening to this for links to more information about living wage, universal basic income, and other topics we discuss in this episode. Or visit woodstein.ca. That's WOODSTEIN.ca. You can support this podcast by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Colin Burrows. Like, share, comment, follow, and support Woodstein Media and this podcast. It helps a lot, and it's appreciated. Have a wonderful day.